Johnny Carson got punched in the mouth by a baboon. He had a tomahawk land in a wooden cowboy's crotch. He even broke down in tears when he least expected it. For 30 years, Carson ruled late-night television as the smoothest man on TV, always calm, always in control, until chaos hit. Viewers saw crazy, unpredictable, even downright shocking sides of Johnny they never imagined.
I'm Johnny Carson, and I think I should tell you that I've given a lifetime to comedy.
From celebrity clashes to uncontrollable laughter, these moments ripped the curtain off his polished persona and gave us pure, unscripted gold. Tonight, we're counting down the 16 most insane moments on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. Number 16, Ed Ames' Tomahawk Disaster. It started out looking like a normal Tonight Show segment. Actor Ed Ames, who played Mingo on the hit NBC series Daniel Boone, came out to give Johnny a live lesson in tomahawk throwing. A wooden silhouette of a cowboy was set up on stage, and Ames calmly explained the proper throwing technique while Johnny stood by, listening like a good student. Everything was going fine, until Ames let the tomahawk fly. The axe sailed across the stage and landed with surgical accuracy, directly in the wooden cowboy's crotch. The studio audience exploded instantly, howling at the sight. But what turned this from funny to legendary was Johnny's reaction. He completely lost it. The king of composure was doubled over, clutching himself in laughter, tears rolling down his face. For nearly 3 full minutes, an eternity on live TV, he couldn't even speak. Finally, when he managed to catch his breath, Johnny delivered the knockout punchline. "I didn't even know you were Jewish."
I didn't even know you were Jewish.
It was a sly reference to circumcision, and the audience immediately understood the joke. The line hit just as hard as the tomahawk itself, sending the crowd into another wave of uncontrollable laughter. This moment was replayed countless times, even during Johnny's farewell week in 1992, because it was pure, unplanned television magic. It showed viewers something they rarely saw: Johnny dropping the cool host mask and giving in to unstoppable, genuine laughter. Number 15, the monkey that wrecked Johnny's hair. Animal segments on The Tonight Show were always unpredictable, and Johnny Carson knew it. But nothing prepared him for the night in 1979 when a small capuchin monkey turned his head into a jungle gym. The guest was animal handler Joanne Embry.
Female. But she has bows in her hair.
Oh, yeah. I didn't notice that. I could tell.
And a dress.
Who brought the monkey out to demonstrate its behavior. At first, everything went smoothly. She explained the monkey's habits while Johnny sat next to her, listening as he always did during these segments. Then, without the slightest warning, the monkey launched itself straight onto Johnny's head. The studio erupted in laughter. The sight alone was ridiculous. Carson, the most polished man on television, suddenly sitting frozen while a monkey dug into his carefully combed hair. Viewers knew Johnny's hair was sacred. It was always perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Now it was sticking up everywhere while he sat with a blank, resigned look on his face. Instead of panicking or calling for help, Carson just stayed perfectly still. His eyes darted toward the audience as if to say, "Can you believe this is happening?" The longer the monkey clung to his head, the harder the audience laughed. Finally, when the handler managed to get the monkey off, Carson looked straight into the camera, his hair completely destroyed, and said, "And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer cats." The line sent the audience into another round of hysterics. But the brilliance wasn't just in the joke, it was in how Carson handled the chaos. He didn't lose his cool, he didn't act embarrassed, and he didn't try to push the spotlight away. He simply let himself be the punchline. Number 14. Don Rickles and the broken cigarette box. Johnny Carson was famously particular about the items on his Tonight Show desk. Every mug, every pencil, every prop had its place. One of his favorites was a wooden cigarette box he'd fiddle with between interviews. It wasn't just set decoration, Johnny actually cared about it. When Don Rickles filled in as guest host in 1973,
It'll be wonderful. You just sit with him and hum to animals and birds all day long.
he accidentally broke the box. He laughed it off at the time, but Johnny didn't forget. The very next night, Carson held up the broken box on air, told the audience what happened, and promised he'd get even with Rickles. Nobody knew when or how. Months later, Johnny got his chance. During a Tonight Show commercial break, he found out Rickles was filming his sitcom CPO Sharky on a nearby stage. Without warning, Johnny grabbed a camera crew and marched across the NBC lot. He stormed onto Rickles' set in the middle of a live taping, holding the broken box like it was Exhibit A. The sitcom audience had no idea what was happening. They were expecting Navy jokes, not Johnny Carson storming in with a scowl, clutching the broken box in his hand like it was evidence. He walked straight onto the set, glaring at Rickles, and the room fell silent for a second. Then Johnny barked the first words. "You broke my cigarette box."
Started the show, I picked my box up off my desk that I've had for 9 years.
Rickles froze, still in his Navy costume with his eyes wide like a kid caught stealing cookies. He stammered, "I am in the middle of a scene," trying to laugh it off. Johnny didn't let up, shaking his head and making that classic mock-serious face, the one he used when he was pretending to be furious but couldn't quite hide the grin underneath. The back and forth was priceless. Rickles begged, "I'll replace it, Johnny. I swear," while Carson shot back with dry, clipped lines, never dropping the act of a man out for justice. Rickles finally tried groveling, telling him, "Just don't kick me off your show," and Johnny, staying in character as the angry host, waved him off like an annoyed father. The sitcom audience was howling with laughter, and so were Carson's viewers at home. They weren't just watching two comedians, they were watching two best friends use mock anger and panic to create one of the most spontaneous, unforgettable TV moments ever. Number 13. Bette Midler brings Johnny to tears. By May 1992, Johnny Carson's retirement was days away, and everyone knew his final shows would be emotional. But no one expected the penultimate episode, featuring Robin Williams and Bette Midler, to deliver one of the most powerful moments in television history. For most of her segment, Midler joked, sang, and bantered with Johnny like any other guest. Then, near the end, she stopped and told him she wanted to sing something special. She turned to him and began a tender rendition of "One for My Baby" and "One More for the Road," a song about last calls and goodbyes. The studio grew silent. Midler sang directly to Johnny with so much emotions. The cameras caught Johnny's face as it happened. His usual polished expression cracked. His smile shook, his eyes filled with tears. And for once, he didn't even try to hide it. Johnny Carson, the man who had spent 30 years keeping his cool on live television, was openly crying in front of millions. The audience held their breath because they knew this was different. Carson didn't look away, didn't cover it with a joke, didn't break the tension. He let the tears sit on his face and showed exactly how much the goodbye was hitting him. When Midler finished, he leaned forward, kissed her hand, and said quietly, "I can't top that." It was one of the only times viewers saw Johnny let his guard drop completely. For once, there was no performance, just a man saying goodbye to the biggest chapter of his life. Number 12. Steve Martin's Magic from the Fly. By 1980, Steve Martin was already shaking up comedy with his strange, unpredictable style. When he came on The Tonight Show that year, he told Johnny he was going to perform a magic act. Carson, always the professional, stepped aside to let him have the stage. What followed was one of the weirdest, funniest bits ever seen on the show. Martin, playing his character, the Great Flydini, began unzipping his pants and pulling out random objects from his fly. First came eggs, then a salt shaker, then a ringing telephone. Each item was stranger than the last, and Martin played it with complete seriousness, as if this were the most impressive trick in the world. Finally, he pulled out a tiny fake hand that waved to the audience. The crowd lost it, and so did Johnny. At first he tried to keep his usual straight face, but as Martin kept pulling out more and more nonsense, Johnny started to fold. He leaned back in his chair, clutched his stomach, wiped away tears, and began laughing like a regular viewer instead of the host. That was rare. Johnny had seen thousands of comedians, and very few could truly surprise him. What made the routine so powerful was that Carson let himself get caught up in it. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to steer the act, and didn't kill the rhythm. He just sat back and enjoyed the insanity along with everyone else. After the bit ended, he was still laughing backstage, telling a producer, "That's the kind of thing that makes this job worth doing." Number 11. Robin Williams takes over the show. Most guests on The Tonight Show followed Johnny's lead. They answered questions, told a story or two, and plugged their movie. Robin Williams never worked that way.
Robin Williams. Flashing the band trick.
Come on home. You are here.
From the second he sat down in the early 1980s, the show wasn't Johnny's anymore. It was Robin's. Carson started with the usual softball. He asked Robin about his new movie, the whole reason he was booked on the show in the first place. But before Johnny could even finish, Robin ignored the question completely and launched into a barrage of random impressions. None of them had anything to do with the film. One second, he was a fiery preacher, pacing around and shouting mock sermons. The next, he slipped into a booming Shakespearean monologue, quoting nonsense lines like he was on stage at the Globe. Seconds later, he was a slick salesman, pitching ridiculous fake products right there at Johnny's desk. He wasn't promoting the movie at all. He was just riffing, bouncing from persona to persona purely to make Johnny and the audience laugh.
Olivier, yo.
Yo!
Never become attached to a house. Never.
Within moments, he had turned Carson's desk into a stage. He leaned over it, climbed around it, and used it as a prop for whatever idea came to his mind. The control room panicked. Producers whispered about cutting to commercial, unsure of where he was going, but Johnny waved them off. He leaned back in his chair, wiped tears of laughter from his eyes, and let Williams go wild. The funniest part wasn't just Robin's energy. It was watching Carson, the most controlled host on television, willingly give up the reins. He didn't try to stop him, didn't steer him back on topic, didn't even ask about the movie Robin was supposed to promote. He just sat there, half laughing, half amazed, like the rest of the audience. What made these moments unforgettable was that Carson loved it. After decades of scripted interviews, Robin Williams was one of the only guests who made Johnny feel like a regular audience member again, sitting there with no idea what would happen next. Number 10. Betty White brings a baby elephant.
Thankfully, right here on NBC. Would you welcome Miss Betty White?
Betty White could always make Johnny laugh, but one of her most unforgettable Tonight Show appearances involved a very unusual guest, a 4-year-old elephant.
Baby elephant, obviously. I've got that so far. Does she want me to feed her or something?
She's 4 years old.
Don, 4 years old?
She's 4 years old.
Betty had just finished telling Johnny about rehearsing with animal acts for Circus of the Stars when she casually mentioned she had brought along a new friend. Johnny, expecting maybe a dog or a cat, suddenly found himself standing face to face with a baby elephant walking onto the stage. The animal immediately stole the spotlight. Betty tried to guide her through simple tricks, but the elephant was more interested in Johnny. It wrapped its trunk around him, nudging his jacket and pushing him backward. Johnny, standing stiff as a board, gave the audience a classic wide-eyed look and muttered, "Which end did that come from?"
Which end did that come from?
After the elephant let out a loud sound, the studio erupted. Betty encouraged the elephant to cross its legs, spin, and even start its engine. Some tricks landed, others went nowhere, and Johnny just stood nearby, watching nervously as the giant animal lumbered around him. At one point, the elephant leaned in close, practically cornering Johnny against the set. Johnny threw his arms up and joked, "Talk to her, not me," pointing at Betty as if he was trying to shift the elephant's attention onto her instead. The audience exploded. What made it so funny wasn't the elephant's tricks, it was Johnny's body language. He kept shuffling his feet, not sure if he should run or stand still. For a host known for calm control, he suddenly looked like just another guy trying not to get squashed. Number 9. The toilet paper shortage panic. Johnny Carson could make America laugh with a single joke, but in December 1973, he made a joke that didn't just get laughs, it emptied store shelves across the country. It started during his monologue. With a straight face, Johnny quipped about a possible toilet paper shortage, saying Americans might want to stock up as there had already been small concerns about shortages in paper products. It was just a gag, one of hundreds of throwaway lines he delivered every night.
Of all the shortages we have, there's a gasoline shortage. You know what else is disappearing from the supermarket shelves? Toilet paper.
But this time, millions of viewers at home didn't hear it as a joke. They heard it as a warning. The very next morning, grocery stores were mobbed. People shoved rolls into shopping carts like they were stocking bomb shelters. Within days, shelves were bare. News stations showed footage of shoppers piling toilet paper into their trunks. One woman walked out of a store with an entire cart stacked taller than she was. Carson didn't even know what he'd caused until the headlines started rolling in. He had to go back on the air and explain that he'd been kidding. It turned into one of the strangest, funniest, and most chaotic examples of Johnny's influence. Number 8. Dolly Parton and Johnny's infamous comment. When Dolly Parton appeared on The Tonight Show in 1977, the conversation started out like normal Carson banter. Quick jokes, plenty of laughs, and some talk about her career. But then Johnny crossed a line that stunned everyone in the room. Glancing at her low-cut blouse, he grinned and said, "I'd give a year of my life to peek under that blouse."
I have certain guidelines on this. But I would give about a year's pay to peek under there.
The audience reacted instantly with a mix of gasps and laughter. Some couldn't believe he actually said it out loud, while others roared at the boldness of the remark. Dolly, always quick on her feet, laughed it off with her trademark charm. She didn't look offended at all. In fact, she later said she took it as a compliment. But inside the control room, the staff was holding its breath. Carson had always been known for walking the fine line between playful and inappropriate. But this was one of the rare times he stepped squarely over it. The comment sparked a flood of viewer mail, some praising Johnny for saying what many were thinking, and others calling it disrespectful. What makes the moment stand out decades later isn't just the joke itself, but what it revealed. Even Johnny Carson, the master of control, sometimes let something slip that he couldn't take back. Number 7. Jimmy Stewart's poem leaves Johnny speechless.
Jimmy Stewart is here. What can you say about this man? He's a marvelous actor, and he's just a marvelous person.
Jimmy Stewart was one of Carson's favorite guests. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't a big talker, but his slow, thoughtful way of speaking always drew people in. In 1981, Stewart brought something completely different to the show, a poem he had written about his dog Bo, who had recently died. Johnny asked him to read it, expecting a sweet little story about a pet. Instead, Stewart delivered lines about the emptiness Bo left behind. He talked about reaching for him at night, hearing sounds around the house, and then realizing his companion was gone. The more he read, the quieter the studio got. Nobody laughed, nobody clapped. They just listened. The words were plain and unpolished, but that's what made them hit so hard. This wasn't an actor reciting a script. This was Jimmy Stewart, the Hollywood legend, choking up as he admitted how much he missed his dog. Carson was stunned. He didn't lean on a joke to cut the tension. He didn't even speak at first. His face was tight, his mouth slightly open, like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. For a man who always had a quick response ready, Johnny had nothing. He simply sat in silence, and the cameras caught every second. When Stewart finished with the line, "I'll always love a dog named Bo," the audience broke into applause.
I'll always love a dog named Bo.
But Johnny still didn't move right away. It wasn't Johnny's tears that made this moment powerful. It was the silence. Johnny Carson, the king of talk, was left completely speechless by the simplest, most heartfelt words he had ever heard on his stage. Number 6. The snake that sent Johnny running. Most times when Joan Embry brought exotic animals onto show, Johnny usually handled it with his trademark calm. But one night in the late 1970s, her massive Burmese python pushed him past his limits. It started like most of Joan's visits. She placed the huge snake on Johnny's desk and explained its habits, while the audience leaned forward, half amazed and half terrified. Johnny tried to play it cool, asking how much it weighed and whether it was dangerous.
It's a heavy snake. What does it weigh, about 50, 60 pounds?
But as Joan spoke, the snake began moving more than expected. In seconds, it slithered off the desk and in Johnny's direction. Johnny shot out of his chair like he'd been launched from a spring. The audience erupted in laughter as he backed away, tugging at his tie and widening his eyes in that exaggerated way only Johnny could. Joan and her team scrambled to wrangle the python while Johnny kept retreating toward the bandstand. The whole scene was chaos. Joan calmly coaxing the reptile, the handlers chasing it, and Carson looking like he wanted to climb into the audience for safety. Once the snake was finally under control, Johnny returned to his desk, straightened his tie, and delivered the perfect punchline. "Somebody better check my pants." The audience roared even harder because they had just watched Johnny, the picture of late-night composure, panic like an ordinary guy. Number 5. Dean Martin turns The Tonight Show into a drunk act. Dean Martin built his public image on being Hollywood's lovable drunk. On stage, in movies, and on TV, he always had a drink in hand and that slow, tipsy charm that made him impossible to dislike. So when he appeared on The Tonight Show in the 1970s, audiences expected Drunk Dean. One night, he leaned into it so much that even Johnny looked unsure if it was an act or the real thing.
You're gonna start already, huh?
No, I'm not starting.
How are you?
I'm almost through.
Martin came out unsteady, slurred a few words, and missed his chair when he tried to sit down. The audience howled, but Carson's expression said it all. He raised his eyebrows and gave a quick side glance, clearly thinking, "Is this really happening?" Dean kept it going. He stumbled through stories, got lost halfway, then brushed it off with perfect timing. At one point, he started a long story about golf, forgot the ending, and just said, "Ah, who cares? It wasn't that funny anyway." The line killed. Johnny could have tried to take control, but he didn't. Instead, he played the straight man, feeding Dean questions and letting him wobble his way into punchlines. The two of them had the audience roaring, not because of polished jokes, but because the whole thing felt like it could collapse at any second. The magic of the moment was the uncertainty. Nobody knew if Dean was truly drunk or just putting on one of the greatest comedy performances of his career. Johnny didn't spoil it. He just laughed along and let the chaos roll. It became one of The Tonight Show's most talked about appearances, proving that sometimes the funniest moments come when no one knows exactly what's real. Number 4, Johnny crashes his own monologue. If there was one thing viewers could count on, it was Johnny Carson's monologue. It opened every Tonight Show, night after night, for 30 years. It was polished, timed to the second, and never interrupted. That's why what happened one night in the early 1980s shocked everyone. Carson was in the middle of his jokes when a voice suddenly heckled him from backstage. It was unmistakable. Don Rickles. Instead of waiting for his scheduled appearance later in the show, Rickles decided to interrupt Johnny live during his most sacred segment. The audience at first didn't know what was happening, but when they realized it was Rickles shouting, "You big dummy!" from behind the curtain, they erupted in laughter. Johnny stopped mid-sentence, tilted his head toward the noise, and gave the audience one of those mock-annoyed looks. Then he broke format completely. He called Rickles out on stage right then and there, ditching the rest of his prepared jokes. Rickles strutted out, feigning innocence, but clearly thrilled with the chaos he'd just caused. The two immediately started trading barbs. Rickles mocked Johnny by shouting that he was only just now starting to get laughs in his monologue. Carson fired back that Rickles had to crash his show because nobody bothered watching his own shows. The audience howled as the two old friends went back and forth. What made it so crazy was that Carson never let anyone tamper with his monologue. It was the backbone of the show. But for Don Rickles, he made the exception. Number 3. Sammy Davis Jr. blows Carson away with impressions. Sammy Davis Jr. could do it all. Sing, dance, act, and tell jokes. But one night on The Tonight Show in the 1970s, he reminded everyone that he was also one of the greatest impressionists to ever step on stage. What made it even better was that it happened completely off the cuff. The conversation started casually, with Carson asking Sammy about working with other entertainers. Instead of just telling stories, Sammy decided to show the audience what it was like. Without warning, he launched into a series of lightning-fast impressions. In less than a minute, he became Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, and Jimmy Stewart. He nailed not just their voices, but their facial expressions, body language, and quirks.
Well, the attitude entirely changes, and
The audience howled, but the best reaction came from Johnny himself. At first, he laughed politely, like any other host might. But as Sammy switched characters faster and faster, Johnny's composure crumbled. He clutched his stomach, doubled over, and was clearly laughing for real, not just playing along for the cameras. For Carson, who had seen thousands of comedians and acts over 3 decades, this was pure joy. He knew how difficult it was to pull off one spot-on impression, let alone 3 in rapid succession. The impression blitz became one of Sammy Davis Jr.'s most replayed Tonight Show moments. Number 2. Arnold Schwarzenegger speaks only in German. By the mid-1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was already one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. Whenever he came on The Tonight Show, the audience expected him to promote his latest movie and swap a few jokes with Johnny. But one night, instead of giving the usual Hollywood talk, Arnold decided to mess with Carson in a way nobody saw coming. Johnny opened with a standard question about Arnold's new film. Instead of answering in English, Arnold launched into a long, serious response, entirely in German.
It's very difficult when you have a German tongue and you have to pronounce all these English words.
He kept going, speaking with conviction and hand gestures, as if everyone in the room could understand him. The audience cracked up almost immediately, but Johnny looked stunned. He tilted his head, gave the camera a helpless smirk, and mouthed, "What is this?" Rather than stopping the bit, Johnny leaned into it. He began nodding along like he understood perfectly, occasionally throwing in nonsense, German-sounding words of his own. The crowd roared as Johnny played the straight man, pretending the bizarre back and forth was completely normal. After a few minutes of this absurd exchange, Arnold finally broke into laughter and switched back to English. He admitted he had always wanted to see how Carson would handle being blindsided like that. Johnny, still grinning, pointed at him and said, "You got me." Number 1. The baboon that punched Johnny in the mouth. That night, animal expert Jim Fowler was the guest, showing off a Celebes ape, a small black primate with a mohawk-like tuft of hair. At first, it seemed calm, holding a banana, while Fowler explained that in some parts of the world, the animal was even worshipped. Johnny leaned in to get a better look, joking around with it as he always did. That's when things went sideways. The ape didn't like Johnny reaching for its banana. Without warning, it swung a tiny but powerful fist and clocked Carson right in the mouth. The audience gasped, then burst into hysterics as Johnny staggered back, rubbing his lip. He shook his head, pointed at the ape, and cracked, "He punched me right in the mouth!" "Monkey gave me a straight right. Didn't you hear the bell?" The crowd roared. Everyone got the joke immediately. Johnny was acting like he'd just been in a boxing ring, and the ape had thrown the first punch after the opening bell. Even Fowler, trying to stay professional, couldn't hold back laughter. He assured the audience the animal was usually very well behaved, while Johnny kept milking the moment, mugging like he had just survived the first round of a fight. What made this so crazy wasn't just that Johnny got hit. It was how fast he turned a real accident into a perfect comedy bit. In less than a minute, he went from victim of a sucker punch to ringside commentator, and the audience never forgot it. Which of these Johnny Carson moments is your best? Comment down below.